Do you want me to promote the Arundel Patriot?
Yes, you're live.
Hello, everybody. This is Katherine, and I am going to tell you a story about the ugly king. And I hope you like it. And if you do, it would be wonderful if you subscribe to the Arundel Patriot. Even if you don't like it, it would be great if you subscribe, because we need all the donation and subscribers. It's a wonderful newspaper. Anyhow, this story I heard many years ago when I was a teenager. It was told by an old lady with an Eastern European accent. And I loved it. And I've been telling the story ever since because it speaks to me. And it goes like this. Once upon a time, there was an ugly king. He was ugly inside out. When he was young, he was impossible. He had temper tantrums. He bullied his friends. He refused to take turns with anybody. He broke things that he didn't like. He pushed the kids around so that essentially he had no friends whatsoever. And all the people in the kingdom were absolutely terrified whenever they came into contact with him, because in the little bit that might displease him, bingo, they'd be sent over to the dungeon. The dungeon was chock-a-block full of totally innocent people that had done a little something that displeased the king. He was just nasty, mean, cruel, and just as ugly a human inside out as ever there was. And in this kingdom, he was the most feared and the most disliked king ever that they had. So he spent most of his time alone because nobody wanted to deal with him. I mean, in the morning, if somebody came to comb his hair and they would get a little knot, he would say, "Oh, you hurt me, off to the dungeon you go." If the server brought something that wasn't cooked exactly right, the server would be tossed into the and the dungeon as well as the cooks. It was just whatever anybody did that the least bit bothered this ugly king, they would be punished. So he often just got on his horse and rode off into the forest because everybody bothered him, everything bothered him. He was just the angriest, nastiest person. Well, one day he had gone further in the forest than he ever had. And he took a wrong turn, and he was deeper in the forest, and he didn't know where he was going. So as he rode his horse, trying to find the right path, he noticed in the distance a clearing, and he thought, that's weird in the middle of the forest. So he got off the horse and he tied it, and then he walked towards the clearing. And he's got closer and closer. He saw that there was a little cottage, and he heard this most beautiful singing voice. And as he got closer, he hid behind a tree and he watched this lovely maiden hang up her laundry on a clothesline as the wind blew the clothes and the sunshine shone on her lovely hair. And as she sang, the king absolutely fell in love with her. He stayed there listening to her sing, watching the wind blow her hair and the sheets and the towels blowing in the wind. And he stayed there until she finally went in the house. All the rest of the day, he thought about this lovely maiden, and he just couldn't think about anything else. He got back on his horse and he found his way home, and he didn't say anything to anybody. And the next day and the next day and the next, all he could do was think about her and how wonderful it would be if she fell in love with him, because, well, she was the first really happy person he had ever seen. Nobody ever smiled near him because he was such a crabapple and so impossible to deal with. And he wanted to figure out how he could get her to love him, but how could she possibly? He was so icky, so ugly. So he called the royal wizard, And when the royal wizard came trembling, said, yes, your majesty, he said, I have fallen in love with a beautiful maiden, and I want to marry her. Yes, so you should. Well, I want her to love me. Well, you make her love you. That's ridiculous. You can't make anybody love somebody. I am so ugly. How could she possibly love me? I need you to make me beautiful. What? I need you to make me beautiful so that she would love me because she is beautiful. And look at me. I'm going to give you 3 days and you come up with some kind of magic. I don't care what. In 3 days, you need to make me beautiful. And if not, off to the dungeon go. The wizard went down and to his study, and there were all these big, huge books. And he started reading and looking, trying to find a solution. Day after day, he barely slept at night, trying to figure out how can he make this ugly king so beautiful. And finally, close to the 3rd day, he found what he thought might work. And he followed the recipe and he got all his different vials of tinctures and he brewed and he cooked. And then the morning of the 3rd day, he came to the king and the king said, well, have you found a solution to make me beautiful? And he said, yes, your majesty, I have made you this mask. And when you put it on, it will make you beautiful. Is it lifelike? Will she believe it's really me? Yes, yes, but there's only one problem, and that is if you wear this, you cannot frown, you cannot shout, you cannot grimace, because the minute you wrinkle up your face, the mask will fall off and she'll see the real you. Well, that's ridiculous. That won't work. I scream, I shout, I frown all the time. You need to make one that will allow me to be just me. I'm sorry, sir, but if you want a realistic mask, this is it. It's the only mask. And if you want it to be look like you and look real, you must make sure you see the gentle smile on this. You need to smile. You need to be calm and you need to be happy all the time. There's no other way? No, sir. All right, I'll try. And so it was put on him, and he pressed the edges down on the ugly king. And when he lifted up the mirror to look, he was beautiful. Thank you, he said, thank you. And he couldn't wait. He went to his stable and he asked the stable boy to bring him the horse. And the stable boy was so terrified, he tripped as he went. And the king started to say, you, um, and he caught himself. Um, try not to be such a klutz, said the king. And the boy was so relieved that the king didn't send him to the dungeon. He got himself up and brought the horse to him. And then the king got on the horse and he found the way to the house. And he tied the horse quite a bit into the forest and he walked over there. And then he knocked on the door. And the door opened. And this beautiful girl opened and said, yes. And the king, oh, he was not wearing his fancy clothes because he didn't want her to know who he was. He wore the simple peasant outfit. And he said, I was wandering in the woods and I lost my way. And she said, oh, dear, come on in. My mom and I had just made some cookies and some tea. You must be thirsty. So they invited him to sit down and they brought him some tea and cookies. And then they sat down and they chatted. They chatted for, well, probably about an hour. The mother, of course, went off to do various things. And during the conversation, the king discovered that she loved poetry. So as he got up to leave, he said to her, by the way, I have a poetry book. which you might enjoy. May I bring it another time?" "Oh, yes," she said, "I would love that." And so he went home. He was so happy. And he came back the next day with a poetry book, and they read again. And after that visit, he made excuses to come again and again. And they went for walks, and they talked about things that they enjoyed, and they looked at the plants. Anyhow, they had such a good time, and the king truly, truly liked her, and she seemed very much to like him back. So that one day he dared to say, "Excuse me, but have you heard anything about the king?" She said, "Oh, yes. People in town tell me that he's just awful. He's just the ugliest person ever. He's really cruel to everybody and puts people in jail for no reason and has a terrible temper and is a bully and nasty. But you know what? Rumors are just rumors. They often exaggerate and make things up. So I don't really believe it." And King was really glad to hear that. And finally, one day, he dared and said, I, I need you to know that actually I am the king. She said, "That's so silly. What a silly man you are." He said, "No, I really am. I, this is ridiculous. I didn't realize you were such a joker." "I'm not joking." He said, "You want to ride with me?" What do you mean ride? I've got my horse back there." "You have a horse? Come on." So they walked over to where the horse was tied in the woods, and she got on with him, and they rode to the palace, and everybody greeted the king respectfully. Oh, I forgot to tell you that during all this time, whenever the king wanted to shout at somebody or scream at somebody, he stopped and then he behaved really well. It was hard at first, and all the people in the kingdom couldn't believe how he had changed. In fact, he even let everybody in the dungeon go because he realized none of them had done anything bad. It was just because he was in such a foul mood all the time. Anyhow, so people were happy to greet him, and she was served the most magnificent meal. And she realized he really is the king. And he said, "I love you so much. Would you marry me?" And of course she said yes. And so they married. And they had a grand festival, and the whole town was happy not only to see the king, but to so happy, but that they would have a queen. And sure enough, in a couple of years, they had um, two children, a little boy and a little girl, and things were really great. Um, but the thing is, as the king, each day he loved her even more than the day before, and it bothered him that he had been lying to her the whole time. So finally, this is now 3 years they've been married, and he couldn't stand it any longer. And he said to her, uh, "Sweetheart, I'm going to tell you something, and you're not going to like it. And I hope that you won't leave me because I love you so much." And she said, "There is nothing that you could say that would make me ever leave you. I love you with all my heart. You're the kindest, gentlest man and the most marvelous father. Of course I won't leave you. What is it you want to tell me?" "Well, dear, I've been lying to you. I've been lying to you all this time, and I love you so much that the lie has really bothered me, and I need to come clean. I just need to tell you the truth." "What lie are you? What? Tell me." You remember those rumors that you had heard about the horrible king who was cruel and who was nasty and bad tempered and had put all these people in the dungeon? Yes, those silly rumors. They weren't rumors, dear. They were true. I am that ugly king. You are not. The dungeon has no one in it, and I see you treat everyone with fairness and gentleness and kindness. And he said, "You see, I was that king, and then I fell in love with you, and I knew you wouldn't love me being so ugly, and I asked the royal wizard to make a mask for me, to make me beautiful. So really, what you see isn't me at all. It's a mask. Really? I'm hideously ugly underneath, and I love you, and I hope you don't leave me when you see what I really look like. Well, let me see. Let me see. So he reached behind, he loosened the edges, and then he peeled it off. And then he looked at her, and she looked at him, and he waited for her scream or expression, and he couldn't tell what the expression was. And she handed him the mirror and said, "Look." And when he looked at the mirror, it was the same face as the mask. His face had changed to the beautiful face of the mask. And that is how the story ends. He had changed not only in his behavior, but in his face as well. He had become the beautiful man of which the mask showed. So that's the end of the story. And the thing is, a number of years ago, I read that if ever a person feels in a lousy mood, really angry, really upset, really sad, or whatever, if they force their face to be smiling, which is not how they're feeling inside, but force the expression to be a happy expression, within minutes, that person will literally be rid of the anger and the anxiety and the sadness. It goes just so. Try it the next time you're really upset. See if you can change just as our ugly king had changed and become a beautiful king. And that's the end. Thank you very much.